We'll get this started, and it's not on the agenda, but all of our school functions start with the Pledge of Allegiance, so if you're willing, if you're able to stand up and join me, I'd love to start this one off the same way.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so thank you everybody for coming out tonight. It's great to see some familiar faces.
You want to introduce yourself?
Oh yeah, so I'm
People might
Dave
think
Toddy.
you're the superintendent.
Thank you. The superintendent is not here tonight. He is away, but I'm Dave Toddy. I'm the Director of Facilities for the Rochester School District. A lot of you people know me, some of you don't. It's nice meeting some new friends. We've got a PowerPoint we're going to go through, and I'll turn it over to Gordon Leedy from Ty & Bond, is our civil engineering firm. I just wanted to kind of talk through briefly just some of, we're collecting a lot of the frequently asked questions that will be put up between the city's website and our website. I think that's still a work in progress, but we certainly have been writing everything down. And I just wanted to address briefly, and we'll get into a little bit more detail when our civil engineering representative starts talking, but a lot of the concerns that we're hearing about water. So first of all, the district, the city is not going to build a project that does not comply with all of the state regulations, right? Everything we do will be designed by engineers, it will be stamped by engineers, and they will take responsibility that they've designed a system that will work. Essentially what that means, a system that will work, is if you picture rain falling, the rain that lands on the parcel of land that's owned by the city hits it and it moves off of it at a certain rate in a certain direction now. Our project cannot negatively impact that flow in water. So what the engineers will do is they will understand how much water hits that land and where it goes. And they will design systems to retain, if we add a hard surface, which is going to allow water to move faster, we will build into it a system that will retain that water, hold it on site, and release it at a rate equivalent to what it was before. Most of those systems include some type of filtration, because we're very concerned with them as for permitting, and we're concerned with our waterways and the cleanliness of water from roadways. We want to make sure that the water we discharge is no worse than it would have been before our project. We've heard a lot of talk about wildlife and animals. There are certain protected species that we will absolutely consider. We will do a wildlife study. What that means is there will be people that walk the property and they go do a count of endangered animals, and they will take that into account. And there are relocation things. Typically and I'm not an expert on this, but I think it's turtles and snakes are the two that we're concerned with in this environment that might be affected by this project. And if there are protected turtles or protected snakes, measures will be taken to ameliorate any impact that we have on them. We've heard a lot of talk about traffic and the roadway and how fast it is. The first thing I'd like to say about that is speed is behavior. Behavior can change, right? The city can change the speed limit. The police department can enforce a speed limit. The DPW can put up flashing lights and signs. We can create turning lanes. This behavior can be addressed through regulation. That's essentially the function of government, I think. The other piece about, we've heard about the traffic and the speed has to do with sidewalks. And sidewalks could be considered, right? They're not necessarily in this project right now. It's something that the city, because the street, down the street, is the city's concern. So if public safety, public works, and the city, we're going to talk about sidewalks, it's certainly something that could be done. Right now, the project focuses on the locus of the school. But there are certainly improvements that could be made at some future date. So again, it's a work in progress, right? We're still designing stuff right now. We're still mapping wetlands. The most current wetland map that we had was 2011, and that's no longer considered viable. We had to get botanists and soil engineers back out there to remap the wetland. That's done. And then we had to send surveyors back out there to make a new topo to locate that wetland. That's mostly done and is being rendered now. So I think by the next time we meet, we'll have that nailed down a little bit better to share with the Joint Building Committee. So that's all I just kind of wanted to address. Oh, and there was another one about outdoor classroom. There was some talk about designing some outdoor classroom space, and I think somebody took that perhaps to mean like modular classrooms, like the things we've been trying to get rid of. So let's, in our minds, when we talk about outdoor classroom, let's recalibrate that, and we'll call that nature's classroom. If you hear us talking about an outdoor classroom space, that's nature's classroom. It's probably some place where kids could walk out, or public could walk out into the woods and enjoy the beautiful setting that is out there. We've heard a lot about, you know, what a beautiful place that is to snowshoe and go out and experience. With this parcel coming under city ownership, we developed the front for a school, the back is protected now for that, much like the woods behind Chamberlain are now protected in perpetuity because they fell under city ownership. So just want to share those few points, and I'll quiet down now and turn it over to the experts. This is Mr. Gordon Leedy. He's a landscape designer by profession, but he's project manager for Ty & Bond. Ty & Bond is a civil engineering firm. The first steps of this project is all civil engineering. It's figuring out the site, figuring out the traffic, figuring out the water flow, all things you just heard me touch on. Gordon's going to get a little bit more in-depth on that. I'll flip slides when you tell me to.
All right, thanks, Dave. My name again is Gordon Leedy. I'm a landscape architect and certified planner with Ty & Bond. We're the consulting engineers that have been retained by the city to handle the design and engineering of this project, working with the project team, Banwell Architects, and the city. So I wanted to, we're going to recap some of the things we talked about the last public forum in case there's anybody who hasn't been necessarily plugged in, and we'll give you an overview of the site and then talk sort of specifically about some of these issues that Dave mentioned. This is the mapping of the project that we have to date, and as Dave mentioned, this was 2011, so it's 13 years old. Things change over time, so we are completely remapping the project. We have a certified wetland scientist who's been working in the state for over 20 years, who has delineated the wetlands, at least in this front portion of the site from the second wetland area forward out to Salmon Falls Road. Because frankly, we aren't planning on doing anything back on the back, say 50% of the site, because crossing those wetlands would be a challenge and frankly is not necessary to implement the project that we want to implement. This is Salmon Falls Road. There's a number of houses along Salmon Falls Road, and then we have a relatively limited frontage here that will serve as access for the property. So next. So the site issues that we're talking about, Dave mentioned that we have surveyors out on site. They are doing a boundary survey to nail down, because there's some question about a couple of the boundary lines. And topography, mapping site features, and mapping the wetlands, so locating the wetlands by survey. We also are collecting traffic data, and we're just sort of beginning on that trip right now. The Stafford Regional Planning Commission collected a limited amount of data, all on Salmon Falls Road, both speed and vehicle numbers, right before school closed. So we have that data. We're also going to go out and collect some additional data, which I'll talk about in a moment. We are doing what is called a site-specific soils map, which is done by a soil scientist, and they go out and do probes and map the soils primarily from a drainage characteristic. It's not a geotechnical map, it's more of an environmental thing, because that plays into the state permits that we need for the project. Along with that, we'll establish some monitoring wells so we can figure out what the groundwater elevations might be. That's more of a geotechnical issue. Wetlands function and value, along with a wildlife review. There's the Natural Heritage Bureau of the state keeps an inventory of threatened and endangered species, sightings, and likely habitat, and that's all a part of the site permitting process as well. We also have had discussions with city agencies that provide utilities to the site, sanitary, sewer, water. There's a new pump station going in up by Tara that is currently, it has been designed, it may be under construction now, but it's imminently under construction. And we checked with the design engineers for that and told them that we were likely to be coming forward with a project that was going to have a specific demand, and that's all been factored into their design and which is adequate to handle the flows from this facility. And then telecommunications, those of you who are lucky enough to live in an area where Consolidated has strung fiber now have an alternative to Comcast, but there is fiber that they're rolling out pretty much statewide that provides very good communications access as well. And then we'll be doing a thorough site plan that takes into account the details of the site conditions that we discovered through the survey and so forth, and considers landscape buffers and what we can do to mitigate any impacts on the neighborhood. So next. The program for the site is a new elementary school, K through 5, pre-K through 5, which is going to be it's programmed for 66,000 square feet. We have something like 75 staff and visitors that we are planning for, so we're providing at least 75 parking spaces. We need to provide a bus loop for 8 to 10 buses that will be there at one time. And then we have, in the modern world, we all apparently drive our kids to school, so we're planning for parent drop-off of 270 cars, or as many as we can fit. We have an allocation of 1.5 to 2.5 acres, depending on how it all fleshes out, for play fields, athletic fields, as well as multi-age group playground areas as well. Next. So this is the plan that I think it's been posted online, so it's available. You don't have to squint and look at it too closely. This is going to change a bit once we get the detailed topography and the wetland delineation. But basically we have this L-shaped building that will be at least partially 2 floors to get that program kind of a little bit more compact than spread out on the site. We have a parking area in front of the school, a bus loop in front of the school, and then playgrounds and phys ed areas adjacent, and then we're dealing with the parent pickup by proposing a minor crossing of the wetland areas here and here, and developing a loop road where parents can queue up and come and pick up Johnny and Sally when they're done with the school day. Next. So there's been, as Mr. Toddy mentioned, there's been an awful lot of discussion about stormwater. And the fact is that we are not allowed to increase the rate of flow off the site. So there is a calculated rate of flow based on the soils that we're going to map that it allows you to calculate the amount of runoff leaving the site. And we are not allowed to increase the rate of that flow. So you do that by detaining the water somehow. I mean, if we had better soils, we may be able to infiltrate more. So in other words, put it back in the ground. But if the soil conditions don't allow for infiltration, you do storage. And and there are a couple of ways that we'll talk about in a moment to do that. There are many ways to do that. The other issue with stormwater is water quality. And that's a little bit of a different animal. You have to do pre-treatment of runoff. In other words, you can't just like take it from a parking lot, throw it into a detention basin, and then discharge it. You have to remove pollutants and particularly what is called suspended solids. So stuff that runs off of the ground, it's carrying solids, and we need to pre-treat it by either filtering it. There's filtration practices. You can either do proprietary systems that are mechanical separators that filter the water, or there are filter devices that you can use, or you can just build a sand filter and run the water through a sand filter. And then you detain it, and then you discharge it. So that is the bottom line of stormwater. But the fact is that the flows have to be attenuated on site, and we can't increase the rate of flow off the site to adjacent properties. And in fact, most, with the exception of one property, the property slopes generally from the northwest down to the southeast. In this direction, there's about 20 feet of total elevation change there. And so all of these properties are largely above our development area. So water flows downhill, obviously, so we need to deal with the existing flows that are coming off of adjacent properties, as well as the flows that are coming from our properties. And then in terms of soils, soils are a big part of what we do, both with building design and with drainage and pavement design. And we have done some limited test pits, and those are shown here on these plans. I don't think they actually got to test pit 10 because it was too heavily forested for them to get into a piece of machinery when we were doing it back in whenever it was, February, March. But the rest of those test pits have been done. They went down about 10 feet, and so they characterized the soils for us. They didn't, it's kind of typical for this area. It was not unexpected that we found what we found, and that was basically glacial till. So it's a very silty, sandy, silty material that has limited drainage. And what that means is that there's a perched water table. So there's a relatively impermeable layer, not rock, but impermeable soils, and the water sits on top of that, and that's why you have the drainage issues that you might experience at Ida Circle and all of that. Now, again, we can deal with that through engineering measures and make it actually, very suitable for building on top of, but it is going to involve some fairly sophisticated design. To that end, beyond the site-specific soils mapping, which is really a superficial kind of typology of the soils, we need to do geotechnical borings. Those have not been done yet because we really need a plan, because it's really, we're going to put the foundation here, we need to find out exactly what's underneath this particular spot. So as soon as we have a plan that we're all comfortable with, we will pursue a geotechnical investigation, which will also do in situ permeability tests so that we have good data to design these stormwater systems with. Next. So what kind of solutions? Well, you know, as I said, the permeability of the soil is limited. So, you know, where we, in other situations, may do rain gardens or infiltration basins or so forth, that may not be available to us as a practice. So we can do wet detention ponds, which have a treatment component as well as a storage component. They actually clean the water by letting stuff sort of settle out. You do a sediment forebay that really collects most of the sediment and then discharge into a detention basin. That holds the water in place until it can be discharged, and there's a metered flow out of such a system. A more kind of mechanical approach would be to do essentially the same thing, but do it underneath one of the parking lots. So you do a chambered underground detention system. And it depends on how big this thing needs to be based on the calculated flows that we're dealing with. And but you know, we're confident that we can accommodate this kind of project. We've done it elsewhere.
Yeah, let me just jump in right here. If anybody wanted to look at some of the previous projects that the city and the school did where we dealt with these kinds of issues, you could go out to the William Allen School and you'll see that the Woodman Area Improvement Project just had the construction of a large, it's a septic system in reverse. Instead of putting water into the pipes and letting it leach out, we put water above, leaches through the soil into the pipes and then gets carried out. That's the type of system where we're talking about water quality and discharge. So we worked with the city to build one of those to handle all of the runoff from Woodman Ave. If you look at the East Rochester Elementary School, you'll see a couple of features. In between the two buildings, there's some green space. That's a rain garden that you just heard described. That was left intentionally like that for water from the hardscape to flow into, to percolate out through and get cleaned and detained on its way out. Also, I'd like to point out on the out drive, so if you drive in the inside and out the outside, you're looking at a situation probably similar to what would be adjacent to Mr. Perry's property, is right adjacent to the roadway. And we put all along the roadway, there's ditches and drainage, there's underground structures to control that water and to make sure that water is clean on its way out. And then additionally, we put a fence along there to kind of beautify it for the neighbor so that we weren't, you know, having the roadway exposed right up against their property line. So we went to some additional lengths to create some beautification. So there are places in the city right now that you can go look at, William Allen or East Rochester, and see some examples of what we're talking about here. Just wanted to share that out there.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah.
So, as was previously mentioned, we are, in the next week or so, we should have the survey completed and we'll have an updated map of wetlands. Any proposed impacts anywhere will be subject to state and federal permitting. So that's, you know, as any of you who have been through that understand, that's a fairly elaborate process. As a part of that, wildlife is reviewed and any mitigation, any required mitigation is proposed. We are likely to have threatened turtle habitat, Blanding's turtle specifically, but maybe painted turtle as well. We have, we may have black racers out there. We may have hognose snake. Those are kind of the usual culprits. But you know, again, we can deal with that if we find those animals on our site. Then we may have to do some additional measures in terms of relocation and so forth, but you know, the state keeps a fairly elaborate database of sightings of threatened and endangered animals. One that wasn't mentioned is the eastern long-eared bat, which is a species of concern pretty much everywhere in northern New England. But really, I'm not aware of any hibernacula that are in this area. They're further south from here, the ones that have been identified, and the bats are, you know, so the mitigation measure is just don't clear when the bats are nesting. As I mentioned, there's approximately 20 feet of variation across the property vertically, and most of the abutting properties are actually above our development site, so you should feel like, you know, we're actually more in a position of dealing with adjacent runoff onto our property than the other way around. Next. So traffic. We heard an awful lot the last time we were here about traffic and concerns. There are significant concerns with accommodating the required turning movements and all of that. We're trying to design the site to keep any impacts from traffic from this property to be contained on the site. In other words, queuing for parent pickup and buses and so forth. I have to imagine that there will be a requirement for some turning lanes into the site. And we're in a process of understanding what that all means as we speak. Part of it is a physical survey of the right-of-way, which we are going to get along with the site. We've had the surveyors collect data on 300, 400 feet in either direction from our proposed entrance, and so that will give us an idea of what kind of options are available to us. We also have received some traffic data, both speed and direction, hourly data from Stratford Regional Planning Commission. That data is in the process of being analyzed as we speak. We're also going to do hand counts of turning movements at Ida Circle and Eagle Drive with Salmon Falls, along with the Whitehall Road intersection on the other end of the site, so that we understand what the adjacent roadway impacts may be from any increased volumes. As Dave mentioned, I mean, my take on it is that there is an ongoing enforcement issue out there that the city needs to get on in concert with any kind of improvements that we might propose to mitigate our impacts and allow reasonable and safe access to the site. But part of the study will also be a matter of looking at safety issues and determining any deficiencies in the area, and see if there's any mitigation that we might be able to propose to make it safer for everybody. Okay. So permits. Every project needs permits, and this project is no different. We will be, even though it's a municipal project, we will be reviewing the project details with all of the appropriate city agencies, just like a developer would if he came in and wanted to propose a project anywhere in the city. So we'll be coordinating that review with all of with the TRC group and all of the applicable agencies. In addition, we need to, since there's more than 100,000 square feet of site disturbance proposed, we will be pursuing a Department of Environmental Services, DES, alteration of terrain permit. That is essentially a stormwater and erosion control permit. So they'll review our erosion control measures and the proposed plans for construction that dictate where erosion control measures need to be. There's an inspection requirement during construction. There's a whole set of things that we need to deal with during the construction of the project. But more importantly, it is a stormwater and water quality permit where they ensure that the project is conforming with state and federal regulations with regard to water quality and water quality protection measures, as well as flow direction and attenuation. And there is, it's based on the state requirements. It's based on federal requirements as implemented by the state. And it's also a very site, as you might imagine, it's a site-specific permit. So it's based on actual data that we collect about and on the property, not some generalized making a whole lot of assumptions about what's there. We have to do the homework to determine what the soil's characteristics are. They do to do a basin or a stormwater measure. You have to actually do permeability studies that are based on the soil elevation at the elevation that you're planning on implementing those measures. So it's not just an area thing, it's a vertical thing as well. So it's basing it on the best information we can gain. There's also a wastewater discharge permit, which we are planning to do a sewer pump station that goes up and ties in with the gravity system up in Ivy Circle. As I mentioned before, the sewer pump station that the city is redoing up by Salmon Falls Road is taking this project into account in terms of the amount of flow that we anticipate. And the wastewater discharge permit is a way for the state to sort of keep score. So they not only keep score with regards to the conveyance system capacity, but also the capacity at the sewage treatment plant to make sure that there is adequate capacity at the plant to deal with whatever new flows are coming along. And then we are anticipating applying for a wetland permit. At this point, we are eagerly awaiting the new mapping so we can really get our arms around what's going to be required. But we anticipate this to be a minor permit, which is, there are several thresholds for projects. At this point, we're looking at a minor permit, which would be under 10,000 square feet. A major permit, might get into a major permit, which is under 20,000 square feet. We don't anticipate getting to an individual permit, which would be an acre or more. That brings into play a whole lot of other folks that are justifiably concerned about that level of impact. We don't anticipate having that level of impact. Along with the wetland function and value assessment, there's also a Natural Heritage Bureau review, as I said, and also a cultural resources review, because anytime you have a federal permit, you have to have compliance with cultural resources concerns as well. Next, please. I think that's it. So I would be very happy to answer any questions you might have. I'm sure that Dave and Brad would too. So.
Can you take notes on questions?
Sure.
And, I'll just call on you. If you want to raise your hands, I'll kind of walk us through that if anyone has any questions. Sir?
This new school, how many schools are gonna close? Are there gonna be schools that close?
Well, yes, sir, right now the plan is Nancy Loud Elementary School
Yeah.
and School Street Elementary School will be closed. Additionally, there's 5 outdoor modular buildings still in the district. 3 of them are at William Allen School, and two of them are at William Allen, 3 of them are at Chamberlain. And those classrooms will all be closed too.
Okay.
So we'll, yeah.
Does that mean they're gonna redistrict the city?
There will be some redistricting required as part of this project. Yes, sir.
Okay, so kids that used to go to this school will now be put in the new school?
Yes, sir, and this is way above my pay grade. This is something the superintendent will deal with, but in conversations I've had with him, he talked at length about redistricting that we've done in the past through when we did East Rochester construction. There was certainly some consideration given to grandfathering families, like, you know, if you're the youngest of 3 and you're a Chamberlain family and your youngest wants to go to Chamberlain, there's some consideration there that it's not a brick wall that goes up.
Okay. Thank you.
Ma'am,
Are there any air quality studies required? Adding 270 cars picking up, dropping off, and the buses?
No, they're not. I mean,
so if it, I'll jump.
well, okay.
So right now, we have board policy and we have requirements that have no idling for all of our buses and all of our parent drop-off at all of our schools. That is a DOE policy for all of our schools. And the construction of the new school isn't necessarily going to bring more students. Right now, we're closing schools and creating a new space. As the city grows and new housing is built, then you would be looking at adding cars. But the bulk of the students going into this school are already here at schools. And then to answer your question about...
I'm also not aware that this is, typically air quality concerns are as a result of being in an attainment area for CO or for, you know, other airborne pollutants, and I'm not aware that this rises to that level. Typically, air quality is really associated with interstate highways, and, you know, like much higher volume, because the impacts from the school, although they're not, you know, I wouldn't characterize them as insignificant, but it's also transitory. So it's not like you have an emitter that's happening 24/7 or even 12/7. You know.
As far as indoor air quality, I would, whatever ventilation systems we have in place at School Street and Nancy Loud and in the modulars, there will be better systems in this new school. So our students will be in a safer, better space as a result of this. So the air quality that they're breathing for 8 hours a day and that our teachers are breathing would be improved.
So what I'm understanding you to say about the air quality question that the young lady had was that you don't feel that 279 cars sitting idling twice a day is going to impact the neighborhood.
Well, as Dave mentioned, there's a no idling policy. So we
How
won't-
do you enforce that with parents?
Well, that's an enforcement issue,
In
but
the middle of winter, how do you tell someone to sit there and freeze? You don't. So, I mean, that's really, it seems like a silly thing to say that it's not going to impact. And you might already have that problem at other schools, but we don't have that problem in our neighborhood and you're bringing it to it. So it is an impact and it should be studied.
So, yeah, we're going to follow every regulation that.
Is there a federal regulation about air quality?
there is a
Idling
federal
cars?
regulation about air quality.
And if
It
it's
has
not-
less to do with idling cars and more to do with general air quality from traffic volumes.
Well, you mentioned about traffic volume on highways, but you're
Right.
not, and you're saying, well, this is only gonna be twice a day. But people who live there, it's twice a day, 5 days a week.
Well, and the issue is that the volumes on highways are an order of magnitude higher.
Well, yeah, but none of us moved into that neighborhood to live on a highway.
Understood, but
So
the
I
impacts
really
are,
think that
the
her
impacts are
question
related
was
to that.
legit.
It absolutely is a legitimate question, but I'm saying that I don't believe that the impacts that would be.
So how do we
created
get
by the
that
site-
proved out to where we can believe that? Just a
I-
side of your word.
It's an excellent question.
We live in Ida Circle where we have tons of problems from a builder who, told us a lot of things.
Yeah, no,
The
I
city
get
approved
that.
all this stuff.
I get
So
that.
now you're asking us to believe the city again, and architects again, when we're living in a neighborhood that has a failed system for retaining its water and various other issues, and so now you're telling us you're hooking into the sewer system that's on Ida Circle, you're telling us that you're creating more traffic in our neighborhood, you're telling us that you're basically, we don't have to worry about water runoff from your facility, but I posed the question last time I was here that anytime you build anything, it forces water underground aquifers and rivers to go elsewhere, so how do you?
And not as a hydrologist, not being a hydrologist, I can't address that
Exactly.
question.
Can we
But-
find out?
We absolutely can.
That's all we're asking.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're absolutely gonna study all of the water impacts of the site to every
Air
state and federal
impacts, traffic
regulation that we
impacts.
have. Yes, ma'am,
Thank you.
absolutely. Sir, I think you had your hand up?
So how do we deal with this at other schools? And how much time is spent actually with cars in a parking lot? The gentleman said it wasn't 24/7, it wasn't 12/7. What are we looking at? An hour and a half, 7? Hour and a half, 5? I mean, we're really talking about a lower volume, a much lower volume than sitting in a parking lot for the entire day with a car running. Yeah, there might be some in the winter, but how's this dealt with at other schools?
Sure, well, people queue up, there's signage about no idling at many of our schools. It's really kept through signage. And yeah, if a parent is running the car because it's cold in the winter, they're probably there for, I would say, a half an hour at the most in waiting and pickup. I mean, I've seen some people show up extremely early and sit there and read a book. But most of the people, that line queues up and is out of there within a half hour, 45 minutes at most of our schools.
Thank you.
Yes, sir, thank you. So I see you two, I will get to you, sir, I think you had your hand up,
Yes,
please.
okay. I have multiple questions.
Okay, that's what we're here for.
For one, so I'm stuck on this 270 cars in a loop, and they're all gonna be moved to the property, okay? So they're off of Salmon Falls Road. But every one of those 270 cars have to come down Salmon Falls Road and turn left or right. Before they turn, they have to stop. One car coming this way, one car coming this way, this car doesn't see that car, and there we have a smash. And then we have, so I certainly hope the traffic study is just not rubber stamped and actually studied and said, yeah, this is gonna be a problem. We have to control these 270 cars because they're all coming up or down Salmon Falls Road, no matter how you slice it.
Sure.
That's just the reality and the fact.
Sure. So can I just jump on that?
Yes.
I've worked in the district for 10 years. We don't rubber stamp anything.
Well,
If we tell you, we're gonna do the study, and we're gonna abide by it, because the last thing that I want is to be standing here, there's an accident, and you're saying, what, I told you, what about that study? Like, we're gonna do.
Oh, I will.
And I know you will, I know you will,
I
I've
will.
seen you here every week, I know you're not going anywhere, right? You and I are gonna have to live together,
Yeah,
figure this out.
yeah, we're gonna be friends.
Right? I know we will.
Yeah.
Right? And we're gonna do everything that we can to mitigate that, right? We're not gonna rubber stamp a study, that's just not, the engineers that do the study are licensed professional engineers. When they complete the study, they put a stamp on it, right? That's their livelihood, that's them saying, yes, this conforms to industry best practices, this data is real and verifiable, and that's what we will build our designs from.
It also is an assumption of liability,
Right.
not for nothing.
Well, right, but I mean, rubber stamp, well, he still gets a rubber stamp because he stamps it. But anyway, I'm certain there's professionals that are way smarter than, just me. I'm not that sharp. So, but reality is there's gonna be all these cars on Salmon Falls Road have to turn left or right. That's gonna cause a traffic jam twice a day. So another question I have, it's kind of a multi-part question. is it too late to move this project? Like, are we too far in to say, you know what, there's a better piece of property over here, and it fits, and it's better access and safer and everything? Are we too far in? Because I asked this. There's right now a piece of property on on Franklin Avenue. It's 30 acres. It's not wet, and it's not too far from Chamberlain School. There was a property on 797 Portland Avenue that came on the market on January 22nd.
We looked at that property.
We
It's
were looking-
adjacent to
Correct.
East Rochester
Rochester
Elementary
School.
School. Yeah,
So what was wrong with that
it's
property?
got a lot of wetland in it. It's got,
Not
it's
according
Jesus.
not according to the GIS map that
Well, the GIS mapping
Mr.
is,
Superintendent said, told us to look at. He said,
Yeah.
you got GIS, use those overlays. So I did.
Yeah.
There's no wetland there. Is the GIS wrong?
it maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, the GIS is at like a 30,000-foot view, so they don't have all of the wetlands. There aren't
Okay.
all of the wetlands out there. It's called the National Wetland Inventory.
Yeah.
So NWI wetlands are notorious for being partially correct. I mean, if you're mapped with NWI wetlands, you can bet that it's wet, right?
Okay.
If you're not mapped as NWI wetlands, it doesn't mean that it's not wet.
Okay. And I just use the GIS like
Yeah,
Mr. Roots.
absolutely.
How do you say his name? Mr. Superintendent told me to.
Oh, Mr. Rapusi.
Yeah, so I did, so I looked, and I'm
Yeah.
like, that's not wet. Why didn't they buy that property? So, anyway, over on Franklin Avenue, is it,
So I'm not familiar with that, but let me ask
It's
you a
for sale
question. Let
right
me ask you a
now.
question about moving this project. The joint building committee has been sat and tasked to build a school on this
Right.
location, not on a different location.
yeah,
The school board doesn't procure property, we don't own property, the school board doesn't have that ability. So that would rest at the city level. So if
Yeah.
the city wanted to say, shut this JVC down, buy another property and move everything over there, I suppose that would be within their wheelhouse. I'm not, there's already been a lot of assets
of course.
committed to this project, there's a lot of momentum in this project, so if that decision, that authority rests at a higher level than this committee, is the answer to your question.
well, I'm just thinking that, spending $380 on that property over on Franklin Street might actually end up being cheaper than the budget overruns that are gonna happen.
So can I just jump on that,
On
because
these-
that's another one of these frequently overheard things, frequently asked questions about budget overruns. We have a dollar amount that we're targeting now, right? We have a commitment from Department of Education for a certain amount of building aid, that isn't gonna change. Before we break ground on this project, we're gonna have a GMP, it's a guaranteed maximum price, so we're gonna develop our drawings to 60%, I think, before they go over to the construction manager, and the construction manager's gonna bid stuff out, and based on that, they're gonna give us a guaranteed maximum price. After that, the only reason it changes is if we decide, oh, we wanna do something else. So overruns, all of the engineering that we're talking about doing is gonna answer all those questions and all those concerns. Like you're saying, this property is gonna, because of the water, it's gonna cost more to build. We're gonna identify and quantify that cost before we break ground. So it won't be a cost overrun, it will be a known quantity under the GMP before we break ground.
Okay, so the price is at estimated 30 million-ish now? So
33, I think.
to me, if it goes to 40 million, whatever, call it a cost overrun or higher GMP or whatever you want to call it, it's more than is anticipated of 33 million. So 40 is bigger than 33. I got that part figured out. So cost overrun or call it whatever you want to, I don't care. One number is bigger than the other. I don't want that number to be bigger. I want it to be smaller. So, perhaps the city council can consider this piece of property that's for sale on Franklin Street now. It might serve your needs better. It might be less impact, less intrusive. It's near Chamberlain Street. That street is already, used for a school. Those kinds of things. Something to consider.
Thank you.
So that's all I have for today. Thank you.
Thank you. So you two ladies, we'll start in a bit. Oh, okay.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi. I have to think about how I'm gonna structure this. My name is Marcia Miller, and I've been working with schools since 1966. I've seen regional schools, I've seen neighborhood schools, I've seen us go from this is the best, set up. I've heard about the magnet school, how well that's doing, and perhaps I'm late to the game, but I haven't, and I'm just gonna say this because I feel like at 80 I can, is that I'm very disappointed that the academic leader of this district isn't here. Because what the school will be is a reflection of you, the school board. Because you're the academic leaders in this district. And I'm hearing, and I can understand how these people felt or feel. They bought a home and they didn't intend and wasn't sold that they were going to be surrounded by a new school. I feel that I'm the advocate for the kids who are no longer going to have their neighborhood school. They're not going to have Nancy Loud. They're coming out of a pandemic. We know all the studies about the children who couldn't go to their school, and then now are back in their school, and now you're going to take them out of their school.
Excellent.
So Allen Street is working, at least from what I understand. The magnet school is working from what I understand. I live inside of the Chamberlain Street School. Those are neighborhood schools. Those kids know the parents know the kids, and as a teacher, I can tell you, it makes a huge difference when you're working in a neighborhood school and you know the parents. Gonic, why does Gonic work? Because it represents Gonic. And the teachers, the parents, I just talked with a young mother whose child is going to be in the first grade in Gonic. She said she's there, didn't have that as part of her plan, but because the school has been good for her son, and that she knows the teachers, she sees them on the street. So I know that I sound passionate about it. I am. I really am. Because you can't get this wrong. This is on behalf of the kids. What is best for the kids? I'm missing what the academic program is going to be in the new school for the kids. How will you set up a sense of community? Salmon Falls Road is not a community. Let's face it. It's not like going to Chamberlain or School Street, or even Nancy Loud in East Rochester. So how is that going to happen? That they're going to have an identity, that this is my school, and they can walk home, because a lot of those kids in the neighborhood can walk home. They can play together after school. That's so important, and I'm not hearing what your vision is for this new school. And the last thing I'm going to say is, how do the kids feel that are in the crappy schools? Because we got some that, they're not state of the art. We're going to have a brand new school and, nice, they look lovely, nice playing fields. How are the other kids going to feel? What are they going to get? So I hope that you'll stop and be very thoughtful about this, and I understand, I hear all the technical, and that's really, really important. I get that. The architects, the developers, but I'm concerned about the academic program that's going to be offered to our kids, and what the thinking is behind taking them from their neighborhoods where they feel safe, especially after COVID, and putting them into, right now, a non-identity school. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Preach, sister, you said a lot.
Thank you very much for that. One of the main driving forces of this whole project has to do with equity for kids. You talked about, what about the kids in this space? How are they going to feel? And the Department of Education reviewed all of our facilities and came up with that we should be looking to move out of Nancy Loud and School Street, and we should definitely not be in modular classrooms, because those are, on that scale of equity, that's one side of the scale of equity, and a brand new school such as East Rochester is
let
the
me
other side of
respond.
that, and we're looking
Dave,
to
let me
bring
respond.
equity.
Because I can't hold back.
Sure.
Okay, I know the Department of Education. Okay, I was a consultant for them for 10 years. okay? I know Frank Edelman and how he feels. Don't throw that in terms of his feeling anything about public schools. His bias is private schools. We got vouchers going to the private schools. So let's take that off the table. What is best for Rochester? Because we are paying, we're taxpayers, all of us, to support this education in our schools. So school board, what do you feel is the best educational program for our kids?
Let me respond to that because I am a teacher myself.
I know
and
you
I am
are,
on the,
and I know
am on
who
the
you
school
are.
board. And I feel like, I may be wrong, but have you been in Nancy Loud School? Have you been Have you been in the basement and looked at the crumbling foundation? Have you looked at the walls that are falling apart? Have you looked at the air quality that's terrible in those buildings? Have you looked at the inequity that those students in those buildings are experiencing because there are other schools that are newer? The two schools that we're closing are over 100 years old. Air quality is terrible. We have health problems with kids. Those buildings are about to be condemned because they're in such bad shape. They're safe, but they're in terrible shape.
And we don't want to put any money into them.
It is extremely cost prohibitive to invest any dollars into those buildings. In fact, the city won't let us completely renovate it because it is so expensive to fix those buildings up. That is why we have moved to look at a new building and consolidate instead of having 8 elementary schools. And you look at Dover, which is exactly the same size as Rochester, they have 3. I'm not saying we should go to 3, but where consolidation makes sense. When we have 2 schools that have less than 100 kids in it, doesn't make sense to have a full staff, full kitchen, have a nurse, have 2 principals, and all the staff that is in those buildings, plus the cost of maintaining those buildings, plowing them, making sure that the maintenance is up on those buildings. It is cost prohibitive to continue that model. That is why this school board, we have spent years, if you've been listening to any of our meetings prior to this, we have spent years looking into this project. This is not something we just decided, you know what, we ought to build a new school. We have spent years probing, looking at buildings. What are our options? Do we renovate? Do we expand? Do we add on to this school? Do we add on to that school? Do we fully renovate this school? Do we not, or do we abandon this school? We have looked at every option. We had architects look at every single one of our buildings and gave us suggestions on what to do. So if we're going to look at what's best for kids, it's to get them out of those old decrepit buildings that are far less adequate and safe for children in the 21st century. When you look at the kids that are in East Rochester School, that is the Taj Mahal in our district. It is beautiful, it's brand new, it's just a few years old. You can't tell me that those kids, or the kids in Nancy Loud and School Street are getting the exact same education that the kids are getting in East Rochester. You can't.
But I've been in East Rochester, it's beautiful. It's a heart of a community. The location. And I think that's what I'm trying to say, is the man is mentioning perhaps a property that's near Chamberlain, that is in a community, that's in a residential area. That's all I'm saying, is that the ability, those children to be able to walk home, to be able to stay after school and play safely, those are important parts, especially for the younger kids. That's all I'm suggesting, is that I hope, you'll be here a lot longer than me, and I'm hoping that those kids have those opportunities, because that's where they forge the friendships and the ability to play together, all of the cross-cutting skills that go beyond academics. That's a part of it.
I guess what I would add to that is when you look at Nancy Loud and School Street, the cafeteria serves as their library, their gymnasium, and it's a basement. It's a basement. It is not a gym. You can't even throw a basketball in that basement. And when you speak to community and bringing kids and having activities and things like that, a new school like what we're planning is going to have ample amounts of opportunity for kids to do exactly what you just said.
Thank you
One
for your
thing I do
comments.
want to add on,
I appreciate it.
I do want to add on the community comments, Marcia. Going to school myself when I was younger, it wasn't my neighborhood school. I had to travel. I had to drive 30 minutes every day to high school. It was not the streets that made it a community, it was those teachers. So, based off of knowing our educators in this town and the level of education we provide, it will be in that building that will make it a community. It will not be the streets around it. It will be your support that will make sure that community stays.
I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Nice
All right, so
I
you
just
were
want-
waiting in the, and Mr. Perry, I think you're next.
I just wanted to respond real quick to him, if that's okay, and support her, because what I feel you're missing the point on is what she is saying is that Seven Falls Road is not a community or a neighborhood. It's like 108. It's not a community. It's not even walkable.
Indeed, I 100%
It's not
heard her,
walkable.
and I agree, because
So
the
I-
schools that I went to did not have a walking to it. And that's what I'm just letting you know, the community feel is made by the professionals in our education. And that's why, I know what you're saying, like, oh, I can walk to school every day.
They
In
can't.
this day and age, to have the property, to have the services, to have the gym, it takes land. Unless you took, if you look at 14 acres of buildable land, if we did that in downtown, the average Rochester resident has a quarter acre of land when you get into downtown. If you have a half acre, you've got a lot of land in downtown, right? It's a quarter acre. 28 homes that have to be dispersed to make that happen. While there is a piece of property here in your great community that is gonna be a perfect location for a school. And that is my belief, and that's why in the school board I've been a advocate for this project.
All right, I think you've been waiting patiently, ma'am.
All right, I have a whole bunch of questions. I basically am from Dover. My kids went to school there. I taught school there, not recently, but anyhow. One question, what grades are the kids going to be in this school?
K through 5.
K through 5. Okay, because when my kids were, whatever, we had a spring program, we had a Christmas program, and you name it. Is there going to be an auditorium where people can come, or are you going to use another building when you have that kind of item? And then the 75-car parking for teachers is nowhere near enough for parents for an evening or even a sports event in the afternoon.
Can you speak,
Sure.
Brett, to the program and the square footage for right now in auditorium and gym and cafeteria type spaces?
Sure. Hi, my name is Brad Prescott. I'm with Banwell Architects. I've been patiently over here taking a lot of notes, so, but in concert with your educational professionals, we've assisted them in putting together the program for the school and started doing a layout step of work for this particular site. So what we're looking at here, and I just want to get to my notes so I'm accurate. Right now we have planned for a 5,000 square foot cafeteria that, and a 7,000 square foot gym, which would have a performance platform of 900 square feet. So it's called a gymatorium, as it were. It's not an auditorium, it's not quite that fancy, but it's large enough to be used by students for performances as well as, even if the community wanted to, if they wanted to do something like that.
Sure, and most of our schools now have the cafetorium, so you're feeding and gymnasium and assembly space all in one, and as an educator, you know that as you, with a higher number of students, it just isn't gonna work out. I know the school board talked at length about wanting to have this type of auditorium space in this facility, because right now, our youngest students have to travel when they put on their Christmas pageant or whatever they, their plays and whatever they do. They don't have a place at the elementary level to do that. They have to go to the middle school or to the high school to do that. And that's one of the things that the school board really wanted to incorporate so that the kids at the elementary level have that opportunity.
I was just wondering about the logistics of parents showing up, let's bring Grammy in to watch Johnny do his second grade, whatever it is, at Christmas.
So the whole perimeter loop where we're talking about queuing up 270 cars has a travel, it would be cars on either side with a travel lane in the middle. So that is actually, in effect, and correct me if I'm wrong, sir, that's an additional 270 parking spaces.
All right, will the entire 270 cars coming twice a day be on that loop and not be backed up on Salmon
That
Falls?
is,
That's the
yes,
plan.
ma'am.
That's,
But they have to turn off of Salmon Falls, don't
But
they?
they have to get
Right.
off Salmon Falls, yes, they do.
Well, I live in
And-
Tara Estates, so I know the whole corner very, very thoroughly.
Go back.
Exactly.
I'm also thinking of security. Everything I've been watching on TV with people sneaking in schools and so on, will this have a fence around it?
So it
And
won't,
a traffic cop, number one at Salmon Falls, and number two, to keep everybody moving on the 270 cars.
yeah, there are logistics around, if you've been to a modern school during, parent pickup, they develop a system, everybody's got radios, and multiple people out directing people with what to do, and, there's a plan in place to handle.
so we don't have it at any of our schools, a gated, fenced-in, totally locked down campus. But what we have is secure buildings.
Right.
And we work in concert with Homeland Security and Department of Safety and the Rochester Police Department at length to examine our entrances, our exits, controlling all of that, to give people ingress to the school without giving them ingress to the student space, that they can then get into the office space and interact with administrators and leave without ever having access to student space. Our older schools were designed before those kinds of considerations happened. So all of the spaces we're talking about closing do not enjoy those benefits. So the security envelope of a new building will be far greater than the existing security envelope in any of the structures that we're talking about
Right,
closing.
there was a lot of talk about community, and I mean, I'm not familiar with all your schools here. We had Woodman Park and Garrison, or two giant elementaries in Dover. They were community, and after hours, kids are out there on the swings, they're playing soccer, they're doing leagues of whatever at all ages. This is in the middle of nowhere. Let's say it's Sunday afternoon and two kids want to go out and play hopscotch or whatever. Is there going to be any security because there are no neighbors to watch this?
So there's no, there's no.
It's not a neighborhood, so it is an isolated item. So it's either only going to be open for 8
So you're-
hours a
so
day,
essentially-
5 days a week, or you've got to provide something.
So essentially, your question is, during unoccupied hours of the school, will there be child supervision?
Will it be open for the public to come in?
So when the school is closed, there won't be anyone there.
Right.
So there won't be supervision when the school is closed. And that's true of every single one of our schools. And I would suspect most schools across the country, when the school's closed, there's no supervision there.
But you've got neighbors, you've
That's
got
right.
Access.
That's the
Yeah.
difference.
Everybody can
That's
say,
the
oh,
main
with the white
difference.
van over there, that funny guy,
Yeah, that's the
whatever.
main difference.
Yeah.
is that it's in the neighborhood.
Let's see, that's the auditorium. My other, well, if it takes a while for cars to stop and turn from two directions to go into the 270 car loop, suppose Tara, it's backed up past Ida and Tara, and at the particular, an hour at least each, at beginning and end of each day, and we need an ambulance or a fire truck. How is it going to go by all these backed up cars and whatever to take care of the rest of us? I mean, they're adding another 100 houses to Tara. Right now it's 280 or 380. And so there's going to be a lot more of that. And then we come out opposite Ida, and I have not seen a problem now. But I mean, you start having all of this and cars backed up on the road waiting to go in. Now you can't do emergency.
That
Just for
happened
the
last
general
night.
public, not even the school.
Yeah.
She's right, that happened last night. There was an ambulance trying to get out of Terra Estates to turn out on the Salmon Falls Road to go to Frisbee and could not get out. Could not get out.
You would think that an ambulance with lights going would at least
Maybe
slow
the person
traffic
they
down.
felt was, they're only allowed to put those lights on under certain circumstances, so that's
Understood.
unfair. She's making a valid point.
Absolutely. Access is part of what the traffic study aims to deal with. And, you do a queuing analysis based on the traffic volumes on the through road. You do a queuing analysis, you establish a network that you then put traffic volumes onto. and you can figure out what the average queue is going to be of people entering and exit at any given point in the day. And the idea is to design the roadway system to deal with those queues and not create an unsafe situation. I mean, conversely, if you over-design things in terms of say you put a traffic signal in where one isn't warranted, and somebody's sitting there and there's no traffic coming around, and they get, they blow the signal, and then guess what? There's a car coming. That's as dangerous as under-designing the system. So it's a matter of understanding what the existing conditions are and designing to deal with both the existing and the anticipated volume. When we do a traffic improvement plan, we have to assume a growth in traffic volumes on a roadway for 10 years out. So we do build plus 10, which is what our design year is. And we typically need to deal with those volumes from a design standpoint and create a safe condition.
Okay, there are no measurements here. How long is the driveway from Salmon Falls to the parking lot and to the school? So can you stand at the end here and say, I think there's a school down there?
I can't answer that.
I mean, because nothing, I'm assuming, is not to scale, but I'm just curious, how
It is to
long
scale,
is the
but whether
narrow
that
edge?
is, what scale that is kind of up for grabs.
Right, but I mean, it's a long way in to see the parking lot, it's a longer way to go into the school. Can you stand in the corner of Salmon Falls and this driveway and see how far anything is? How long is the parent loop? Is the school bus still down there? I'm just curious.
From the viewpoint of Salmon Falls Road, looking in there to where the school will be built, you'll for sure be able to see the school
Yeah.
and see buses toward the
I think you're
school
right.
and those kinds of things. It's not that far back on the property. They're
I
gonna
mean,
build
I'm
on the front of the property, so you're for sure gonna be able to see it. That's not gonna be an issue, really. It's not gonna be hidden, like back in the woods or anything like that.
And I'm just thinking again, my kids with this winter Christmas program, if, let's say, a lot of parents want to show up the whole works, and they're stuck way out in the back of that loop, it's a hell of a long, way to walk,
Yeah,
whatever the weather,
I mean,
light or probably dark in the winter by about 4:30, to get to the school, to go to that auditorium
We
and
also
see the
may be able
program.
to create some overflow parking areas closer to the school that would be like gravel, not paved kind of thing. The whole idea is, with the site program the way it is to limit the amount of pavement and impervious surface. So, gravel is essentially impervious, but it's softer visually anyway, and, if you're not gonna have cars parked there all the time, then, you shouldn't, in my opinion, you shouldn't.
I mean, your parking lot is,
So,
again, I
yeah.
don't know the scale, but way, way away from the building. If your parking is literally in that loop.
In the loop is quite distant.
So,
Yeah.
did that get you through your list? Because I know Mr.
Yes.
Perry's been waiting patiently. Thank you. Sir, thanks for your patience.
So, listening to the discussion about community, I'm speaking from the viewpoint, I went to East Rochester School, and I grew up on Salmon Falls Road, about a half mile from the proposed site. I had no sense of community to East Rochester School, Rochester Middle School, or Spalding. My friends that I had, when I made, going into middle school that lived, on the, Maple Street area or up on the Chamberlain Street area, they all did have a very strong connection to those schools, and they were able to walk to their schools. There's gonna be a very small handful of homes that will be able to allow their children to walk to the school as it sits, which is why in the past I brought up sidewalks and the extra financial impact of that seems to be kind of tabled as not this project, even though it is directly integrated. If there was no school going in, you wouldn't put sidewalks in this section of Salmon Falls Road. But I think that the community aspect is definitely a major contributor to how the entire school environment will be. Another, thing I want to bring up is, so you talk about water flows and all that and how everything's going to be done at these standards. And you talk about the rainwater fall. Are you taking into account you're talking about the swamp that runs through? Water does flow through that. And so when you have that excess rainfall, it's flowing, maybe not fall on the property, but because it has to flow through the property, and it allows extra places for that water to run off through the property. I do currently have water runoff issues from what is now the city property. It does flow from, if you're looking up at the property, you have the driveway to the old mobile home up there. It flows in and around to where I have that row of bushes, floods up alongside my driveway. It's been doing that ever since I've moved there. In 2018, the previous owner had said, yes, this has gotten worse since the building of Ida Circle, and as that has finished, that has definitely increased. You talk about how Ida Circle had to go through all the same rigorous standards and testing and permits and yada yada, but it's apparently obvious that there is issues with water from that project. Just the same as last time I had brought up the effect to Willen Pond that building Target and Home Depot had done in Somersworth. I'm sure that when they built that wonderful complex where Home Depot and Target is, that they followed all standards and state stuff and federal and all of that, yet that still didn't stop the water to go somewhere, because as you change grade, no matter what you do, whether it's wetlands or not, you are displacing water somewhere in how it flows and moves. And unfortunately, due to the fact that this is a piece of swamp that runs through the property, while you have other sections of the property that aren't wetlands and aren't swamp, your water still drains through those areas. And I know that we have wonderful engineering capabilities that can address most of these issues, but at what cost to us, the taxpayers? We can build anything that we want to build in this day and age. The engineering capabilities are just amazing. But when it's a private company that wants to do something radical like that, good for them, that's their money. Right now, you're spending our money as us as taxpayers. And so, to this gentleman in front of me's point of, okay, we're proposed at 33 million. If all these wonderful solutions that we need to come up with to move the water and push it to some place that isn't going to be damaging people like me who are downhill of it, or my uncle who is also in a butter to the property, at what cost? Are we talking another 20 million in drainage? That seems like it'd be foolish money spent, where the gentleman brought up that there was a parcel on Franklin Street that might be more suitable. Yes, it's another $300,000, but $300,000 versus several million in runoff and drainage controls seems foolish to me. And my last point.
I just want to jump on that for a second, because you're throwing around a number, it's 20 million.
Yeah, it was an arbitrary number.
Okay, so it's not a number, it's just, that's gonna cost 20 million, right? Like, we're gonna figure out what it's gonna cost, and we're gonna know what it's gonna cost before we do it. And
Are we? Because
there's an
one piece of
entire,
property without knowing the cost.
so there's an entire joint building committee, which is composed of half city councilors and half school board members, whose job it is to look at that. And when we put that GMP in front of them, they're gonna say, oh my God, it's 20 million for drainage. And don't do this, this is crazy. Those are people you vote for, they're people that represent you, they're taxpayers in this community. And that's the whole point of the JBC, is to oversee that. And the 20 million is just, it's a number that gets put in people's minds. There's gonna be some cost to drainage. It's not gonna be anywhere near 20 million.
When we first came on to this project, we were retained to do a limited due diligence investigation, right? So we took all the information that the city had about the project, or about the property, and we evaluated that. We did, assisted in getting some additional information done. I mean, it wasn't obviously the survey that we are doing now, or the wetlands delineation that we're doing now. We took our best estimate of what the potential issues might be with the site. And as a part of that process, we developed what I would characterize as a planning level opinion of probable cost. So,
And that is incorporated in the 33
Right.
million that we're talking about.
Right.
That are, just like a number can be arbitrary, the $33 million that we're talking about with JVC and with the cost of this project is site-specific. It's with knowledge of this piece of property. It's with Ty and Bond, SW Cole, being out there walking the property, looking at it.
and
But it
so.
seems like some of this wetland stuff seems to be more of us, you're finding more surprising, and when I bring up these issues that I've actually actively had, being the neighbor, being the person who has seen this for multiple years, it seems like, oh, well, we didn't realize how wet all of this is. It has been this wet for this amount of time. My uncle's house is next door. I grew up in that house since 1991. That house has to have 2 sump pumps in it with a 6-inch drainage line. And that's the own fault of whoever built that house, whatever. That's not the fault of the city or anybody else. But the property itself is very saturated. You know, it seems like it gets understated more often than not, the wetness of the property. Because we had a conversation and you corrected me on the difference between wetland and wetlands. And wetlands is land that is just not well properly drained, which my understanding was the definition of wetlands itself was soil that's not drained well.
That's not exactly true. I mean, it's not, this is a very wet site. There's no question about it. And there are significant wetlands that go through portions of the site. But a wetland, a regulated wetland, a jurisdictional wetland, is defined by soils and hydrology and vegetation. We have to have all 3. So, and that's what wetland scientists do, right? They go out and they look at the site and they do probes and they figure out where the line is, because there is a line between wetlands and not wetlands from a jurisdictional standpoint. Now, that doesn't mean that we just say, oh, well, so anything goes up here because this isn't wetlands, right? I mean, we have to deal with the fact that there is limited permeability on the soils. And if you have a specific issue on your property that could be caused by something that's going on the school property, by all means, we should sit down and review it. Once we get the mapping and we understand, what the deal is, we can absolutely take that into account when we design the driveway that's coming in, right? So, and you're right. With liberal application of money, anything is possible, right? But we took our best guess at what, based on the information that we had on the site, which indicated that there was limited permeability in the soils and that there were going to be challenges, of what it was going to cost to do, like an underground storage system, for example, because it's not free. You're absolutely right. But that's all in the number that we presented to the JVC.
So, yeah, you had one last point?
One last point was, a comment got made when you asked about the prospect of maybe finding a different piece of property, and you had said that it wasn't up to the school department to make those decisions. Was it not the school department who purchased the piece of property, or was it the city council that bought the piece of property? Because my understanding was that it was actually the school department themselves who bought the property with basically no public input because, well, it's a school, so they don't need public input because they bought the property.
The school department doesn't purchase property. That happens at the city level.
Well, I thought that, from what I had read, that the city council had approved the school department to buy the property. That was how I had read it, and it may have been that I interpreted that wrong, but that's how it was presented.
Was also one of these meetings, at one of these meetings, we also heard the same thing, that the school board was approved to purchase the property by the town council, that the school board bought the property with the approval of the town council.
So the property is owned by the city, and purchase of property happens at the city level.
So the city is the one that actually did the buying.
the city may have authorized the school to use, I guess I can't.
We just want clear, that's all
Yeah,
we're all
sure,
asking for, is
sure.
clarity.
And how exactly
Because
that
November
line.
has,
So let me
this-
answer
my
your question.
superintendent of schools
Let me answer
said
your
to me
question.
last time, when we were leaving, he was so kind to talk to me and
Yes.
Kobe for so long, and I really appreciated him. And one thing he said to me that stuck with me, by the way, that I really appreciated was that these are all elected officials and November is around the corner.
So let me try and answer your question. Where exactly that line was allocated from, I'm not gonna answer, I don't know. I don't carry the full expenditure budget in my head. But I'll tell you this, none of our schools, right, there's 11 school buildings in the district, the school board, the school department don't own any of them. The city owns the property, the city owns the buildings, the city allows the school to use them indefinitely, forever, until we say, this is not a school anymore. And then what we do is we give those properties back to the city. They get returned to the city. So these schools that we're talking about closing, once we fully remove ourselves at the school level from a building, ownership of that site, it's just the city takes over. And it's city property. It's not, the disposition of it after that is a city matter.
I just thought it was kind of odd how it was a school board decision to buy the property, but now all of a sudden you kick the ball back to the city council on whether or not there's something to be a change of venue. And I don't foresee there being a change of venue, to be honest. I see this going forward because of the momentum. And you said that.
So the process, as we talked about in the last time, the school board talked about, we reviewed properties at the school board level, because it was in need of the school board. So we reviewed properties, we put out, the school board issued an RFP to the public, anybody that has property in Rochester, we solicited from real estate agents, and then if you have something that meets these criteria, please let us know, we'll look at it. We asked for a list of every property that the city owns, we were given that, we went through all that stuff. The school board then went back and met with city council, and city council approved this property as the site of the school. So, I guess, there's certainly some give and take. The two things don't exist, without one another. We're all part of Rochester together. I hope that's clear.
Clear enough.
All right. So, you, sir, you had your hand up.
I just want a yes or no. I'm happy to see all these brand new faces here. Congratulations for coming and thank you. I would like to make it clear that only 15 million is coming from the state level and the rest is coming out of our pockets here.
That's right.
So I want to make that clear. So the extra 15 million plus the 1 million for drainage, I've worked a little bit with plans. It's going to be not less than $1 million to move all this drainage. It's going to be substantial. You're talking 2.2 probably, somewhere around there. But anyways, so what are you doing to save us the $15+ million in this? You like to say Marshwood or any of these other schools in different states where the Taj Mahal, they have solar panels, solar heat, all these radiant heats, geothermal heating. So what are you putting into that? $15 or $30 million for a school, you don't really have that budget to put in solar and such. That's the bare minimum, 4 square walls. You're not doing anything extra. Are you doing LED structures? Are you considering any of these energy efficient savings over the future?
So is that the yes or no question? Are we
The yes or
considering?
no was the 15 million from the state.
Yes.
And then the 15 million is coming from out of our pocket.
Anything that doesn't come from the state would have to come from the
It's
state.
whatever they deem it to
Right.
be.
Yeah.
It's 15,
So-
20, 30, 40, whatever.
We, as part of the NEP design package, we will certainly look at any alternatives we have. We've put solar on a bunch of our buildings at actually no cost to the city. It's a power purchase agreement, so the solar farms that we have in all of our schools now are owned and operated by others with the agreement that we buy all the power they can make. But there was just HB 3, I'm gonna get it wrong, 15 maybe, about net submetering on solar panels for municipalities in New Hampshire. I think that just changed. So there are certainly opportunities that we will explore and look into. There's also federal dollars that we will absolutely look into for geothermal. I'm pretty excited about that. Any program that we can support from federal or state programs or investor programs like we've already done with the power purchase agreements you see all across the district, absolutely. We're doing a lot of work right now at the high school, all funded at the federal level. Zero local impact on that. Anywhere we can get money to flow into this project, we will exploit that to its fullest, and that will all be part of the MEP design package.
One additional, this gentleman's going to be first hand, the huge part of it, but what fences and barriers are you doing to protect us and our land and our liability for insurances and such purposes? To ensure that you're not having children come onto your property after hours, vandalism, because schools attract vandalism. It is what it
Especially
is.
this one's gonna be far off the road, it's not like Chamberlain Street where you can see the playgrounds and all that stuff.
It's not a.
That whole area is gonna be so far from the road that you're not gonna have, a cruiser going by isn't gonna be able to tell within the 10 seconds of passing, hey, is there nefarious activity going on or not?
Homelessness.
Oh, that's another big rampant issue in the city. But, yeah, that was something I was thinking about with her concerns about security was, most of these schools, you can drive by and you can have great visibility of the areas in which you would expect people to be doing anything. Salmon Falls Road, you're so far off the road with that school that you're not going to, unless you're gonna have big street lights up, that's gonna light up all of our houses all night long. Light pollution coming off of it at night wouldn't be awesome to have.
No, it wouldn't, and that's certainly something that will be looked at, again, as part of the MEP design package. They look at light pollution, they look at loss of light over property lines and what that impact is. Your question directly about fences, we can't answer at that point because that's part of the design package that we will certainly look at fencing, whether it's to keep kids, especially the elementary schools, sometimes you get kids that like to just run, right? So we try to keep the playgrounds secure to prevent that. That same fence is gonna keep the kid from running, might keep them from going into your property. So that kind of fence, but also like the example that I gave you earlier of East Rochester where we put up a wooden fence as an aesthetic piece to help ameliorate, to soften that edge between the two
Will it also be a sound
properties.
barrier of any kind?
Again, that would be something in the design, I don't believe there's any
Because along highways,
design.
for
Oh,
people that
yeah,
are affected, they
for
have sound
highways.
barriers.
Yes, I've seen them on Route 16 and, yeah,
Yeah.
sure. So I think that addresses your question. The other piece, I guess, I'm just going through my head, you can't see much at all what goes on behind Donick. You can't see anything down below William Allen. You can
But
see
those are
McClellan pretty good, you
neighborhoods.
can't see anything behind Chamberlain, and there's no neighborhood behind Chamberlain.
No, not behind
There's no
Chamberlain.
houses back there, and same with Donick, there's no houses back there. Same with, well, William Allen, there's a neighborhood, but there's a whole area of woodland out there that you can't see it at all from the street, and a patrol car going by would never have any idea what's going on at that facility.
Are you planning any security for that school? That would be direct to the police department?
As I said, any design of this would certainly include control of ingress and egress. It would include security cameras, both interior and exterior. And it would include a full security package. We get all of that stuff. Like I said, we meet with Homeland Security, we meet with Department of Safety, we meet with the Rochester Police Department.
Well, that
They
just seemed
all-
to be such a big concern about not having modular units and, all these other things that we've talked about over the weeks that I've been coming. There was all kinds of talk about kids being in outside spaces and how it was unsafe with, the amount of violence that we have going on in schools and this and that. And now we're putting a school in a very rural location with cars that go by pretty fast that they're saying, and what I'm hearing is that there's no really way to surveil them. So if you don't have a very sophisticated security system going in, how are you gonna prevent homelessness, vandalism, and all the other things that were mentioned?
Well, I don't.
And that's more money, more money.
I don't prevent homelessness now. I would
No,
love to, I wish I could.
I'm not trying to be coy with you, I'm just trying to say
You're asking
that
me
those are all the things that
what
they're
this project is gonna
concerned.
do. There's a real homeless problem in the city. I mean, there's a homeless problem all over the country.
But
Well,
that's,
so if I
that's not
may,
answering anything.
if I may jump
yeah.
in. So Typically we do a lot of schools around the state, so there's multiple layers of security systems that are enacted in any school design, including active and passive security measures. So I'm going to address a few of them. I'm not sure I'm going to get to all the topics. You're alluding to a lot of different ones, so we want to make sure that, so bear with me. Separate structures inside of a school campus create a tremendous weak point for security because the students are traveling between classroom buildings at any given time, and the more entrances to the building on a daily basis, the more porous the campus is, the more vulnerable it can be to an attack. By closing down these portables and relocating or redistricting in such a way that we're opening this new school is going to be a much more secure environment, not only for these students, but also for the students at the existing schools where the portables are going to be removed. Typical security systems for a new school would include barrier systems for vehicular travel, but also hardened barriers to try to stop door crashes. Then there's shooter mitigation measures, not all of which I'm going to discuss here for security reasons. There's forced entry impact measures that are also done to harden the building, to stop somebody from coming in and attacking students. There's the configuration of the building itself, both on the inside and the outside, that Dave had alluded to before, about not letting people sort of wander through the school after hours or even during school hours, and having very controlled systems at each entry point. And then manually or manning those, forgive my comment, having a staff person at intervals throughout the exterior of the building during drop-off and pickup periods, so you've got that in-person control, not just cameras, at your most active moments when the school is being used on the outside. Then there's the electronic surveillance systems as well. So we're going to end up having electromagnetic door locks in a lot of locations. There's going to be procedures for lockdown or shutdown after the drop-off period and before the pickup period. So some doors will be manually locked and unlocked by staff versus mag locks. That's going to be something that we're going to have a lot of discussions about, because all of these things are procedural and have to have operational input. Then, of course, there's the cameras. There's usually a lot of cameras when you're building in any of these schools.
Well, I think that's our questions. It's not the interior, it's the perimeter and how it affects us directly in our neighborhood. I mean, we all can attest to, we want the best for the kids, but we want the best for us too. We gotta live with this.
Yeah, and I hear that there were some of the child security was brought up, so I want to make sure that we're covering as many bases as we can in my answer. So usually you have a security vendor that you use, the district uses, which will be coming in to do an assessment of this building design and make recommendations for the exterior surveillance of the building. There's also a lot of response systems that they put in, so that if there is an issue during school hours, we can facilitate a quick response to an incident or an issue. And then, of course, there's the cameras and the constant surveillance during off hours. Lighting was brought up earlier. I don't know if you wanted to talk about lighting.
I do, because I enjoy going outside in my backyard and looking up at the stars, and you're gonna ruin it.
So and I think Gordon could probably talk more intelligently about this than I have. In schools that we've designed, basically exterior lighting has to be very thoughtfully gone through. So what we try to do is look at light activation, light shielding, light intensity, and light spacing.
And I mean, there's a whole range of standards that are called dark sky standards. And I don't offhand know if Rochester has dark sky standards adopted, but that's, yeah, I mean, we typically find that in all of our projects now. You use cutoff fixtures, you don't have the kind of wall packs that glare out at everybody. Will you be able to see lights from your house? Perhaps. Will it be shining in your direction? No. So, you know, the fact is that, you know, lighting costs money, and, you know, illuminating things costs money, and so the more you can direct that light to the place that you want to illuminate, the less you have to light the world, and, you know, the less impact you have on wildlife, on neighbors, on everybody. So, you know, we will carefully consider that. And in addition to that, you know, light fixtures also provide mounting opportunity for other surveillance cameras and so forth. So, you know, this is not going to be Fort Knox. It's not going to be a military establishment. It's not going to be, you know, 100% security, but we will provide a level of security and surveillance that's appropriate to the use. So
Well, he was talking about how the school is going to be able to be locked down
that's exactly right.
if you have a problem at the school. How do we lock down the neighborhood?
We can't lock down the neighborhood.
That's right. So if you have a
But that-
problem,
Well,
I
But we
understand
can't knock
that.
down any
If
neighborhood.
you have a problem, you now have this school to where there's a lot of wooded area behind it, like you have said there were several other schools, and you have a neighborhood next to it and in front of it and beside it. So if you lock down your school and there's an active shooter, we all get to deal with him. Because now there's an attraction for an active shooter to go to. We don't have an attraction for an active shooter to go to right now. You're creating one for us. So you're also saying that you're gonna lock down the school and have all these modern technologies, but then we're all on our own. That's kind of unfair. So if you had that in a less rural area, you would be able to have police response quicker, fire department response quicker, ambulance response quicker. Instead, we're gonna have to like kind of depend on ourselves. So there's a lot here, and I'm not saying that it's all your fault. I'm just saying that it's a horrible location. It has been from the start. And I think every one of these comments all comes back to location, location, location. It's not about we don't want the best for the kids. It's about the location and all the things that it brings with it. That's all.
Are there any other questions, comments?
I just wanted to
Are we
say.
done?
Yes, woo. I just wanted to thank you all, because I really do think that the foundation here, the reason we're all here, regardless of age and regardless of background, is that we care about our kids.
Here, here.
We care about the city of Rochester, and we care about our kids, and we want them to have the best education going. And I know that I've been in school board meetings all my life, so I understand the give and take. But when we, you know, kind of drill down to what is it that's the most important thing, it's what is the best education that we can provide with the dollars that we have for the kids. And I think, you know, one caution that I would give you, being in a classroom, going through this with many different buildings, is just please, as a teacher with the kids, it was so exciting to have a new building, but not so exciting that there wasn't enough money to buy the materials and to buy the desks and to buy the chairs that really made a difference and made it feel like this is really special and I really love it. And so I just caution us, because I've been there, done that. And it's just, you know, it's always, well, it'll be in the next budget cycle. And that was a very long time of budget cycles, so but again, I thank you all. Thank you, Dave, thank you, thank you. Thank you.
So there's a couple of hands up on front. Yeah, amen. Thank you. Sir?
So I just want to say one thing for the money. No, I have two things. Sorry.
No, you said one.
Two.
Hold him to it.
Did I say one? I heard
You're running the
one.
next
I heard
meeting.
So, no, it's a positive thing, right? So the money there's going to be some cost savings from closing the schools because we're not gonna have 2 principals and 2 vice principals and 2 cafeteria staffs and 2 whatever, right? So we can consolidate some of those positions and some of those economy of scale, buying food and those kinds of things, to use Mr. Mayor's words. Thank you for telling me this. So there's gonna be some, so there's gonna be some cost savings from that to offset the extra costs
Oh my
anyway.
God.
But I also wanna say, a lot of people have a lot of opinions, and some of those opinions are exactly that. They're not based on truth and fact. And I know the Joint Building Committee is going to be putting together a FAQ to dispel some of the rumors and say what some of the facts are. But if you watch some of the Joint Building Committee videos and those kinds of things, and pay attention to what the people that are working on a project are saying, not what the people on Facebook are saying. Facebook, they just make things up and then it goes crazy. Listen to what the people that are building on the Joint Building Committee and the City Council are actually saying and not what you hear. Listen to what they're saying and get some of the facts, and then they'll help guide some of your questioning and opinions. Okay, that's it. Thank you. Thank you for taking the abuse.
Absolutely. We have one final comment over here.
I want to say, thank you all for serving on the JPC. Sometimes being an elected official is quite an honor, but it's not always honored. So I appreciate all the work you've done. To Mr. Papst's point, absolutely, you've been looking at this for a long time. And I don't want to kick this can down the road so my kids have to deal with it. I grew up in Rochester, like you, Ms. Perry. Went to school, East Rochester School. I grew up across the street from Nancy Loud. It's time for Nancy Loud to close. It's a building that no longer suits the needs of our community. And our community is not made up by buildings. It's not made up. I've worked in big schools and I've worked in small schools. And I worked in a school surrounded by houses. Wonderful. But the community is made up by the people that are in there. If I have a school full of teachers that don't care, I don't have a community, even though they're surrounded by a neighborhood. If I have a large school that's set in a rural area, then they love those kids, guess what? We have a school community. And that's what Rochester deserves. That's what we need. And I appreciate you all moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I'd like to, so the architect,
Please.
I'm kind of curious about who you're hiring for the traffic study, because certainly Stratford Regional Planning, you're a landscaper and a traffic study?
No, our company is
It
performing.
falls under civil
So it's gonna
engineering.
be internal?
Yes.
That's a no-no for me.
Well, no, it's,
I mean,
we are independent. We don't work for the city. And
No, you work for Ty and Bond, right?
that's right.
Okay, and Ty and Bond has made the design, Ty and Bond's gonna tell you where the wetlands are, Ty and Bond's gonna do the traffic study. I don't happen to favor that.
So Ms. Keynes, when we chose Ty and Bond for the due diligence, one of the reasons I put before the school board was that
I
they
didn't hear
have
it. I
in-house
missed it.
traffic capabilities, which was as considered by the school board to be a good thing. So.
Yeah, well, that may be, of the school board members that were at that meeting, I was not at that meeting, so
That
I
meeting
would
is
have,
available
I would
online.
have disputed it
And
at that time.
I heard him say it, so. was
It
in
must
the
be
meeting.
true, it must be true, he said it.
Well, hey, thank you, everybody, for coming out, and thank you, everyone. Well, there's some dates up here.